On the morning of October 7, after more than a year of planning and practice, Hamas, under the cover of what appeared to be a routine rocket attack from the Gaza Strip, launches an invasion of Israel along the entirety of its frontier with the country. 3,000 terrorists arrive via breaches that they dynamite along the border fence, paragliders that cruise beneath rockets and their contrails, and fleets of pickup trucks. In addition to sowing carnage at a nearby music festival, in which they murdered 364 young people, and at various kibbutzim or agricultural settlements along the border, they managed to overcome several army bases, including Nahal Oz. 42 soldiers of the 13th Battalion of the Golan Brigade fell that day, a huge blow to a battalion numbering nearly 900 soldiers. Several days afterward, the battalion commander Tomer Greenberg can be seen here addressing some of his surviving soldiers during the nearly 3-week hiatus between the October 7th attacks and the beginning of Israel's ground invasion on October 20th. Because of the significance of what he said, I've decided to translate it for you into English. Guys, the 13th are heroes, but this is just the beginning. We have more nights of this defense. The ground campaign is yet to come. See how prophecies fulfilled itself. The Yom Kippur War generation, now us. In 10 more years, heroic commander, the 13th, with heroic fighters, some of you will be married and others elsewhere, will gather the unit on another Yom Kippur and tell of you and show pictures of our dead. For you are no less heroes, not just an iPhone generation. Be proud of everyone standing here, but this is just the beginning. Okay, let me just add some context to what you just heard there. The commander of the battalion, Tomer Greenberg, you see there standing among his soldiers. They're standing together as a unit near the border of Gaza. This is several days after that original assault of Hamas on October 7th. And he's reminiscing with his soldiers about the glorious past of the unit there, the 13th Battalion of Golani, namely in the Yom Kippur War. Now, it's not just a coincidence. The assault of Hamas on October 7th is very reminiscent of the October invasion of the country back in 1973 by Israel's neighbors Syria and Egypt, a similar surprise attack which killed in its first couple days several hundred, if not more, soldiers. Okay, so the parallels both between that war and this one, but also he's predicting that just as the unit earned itself a name in that war, so will stories be told 10 years from now of this generation, of his unit, of his soldiers, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. For here you see in footage last week this unit fighting there in the midst of Gaza, okay, in a heavy ground or urban combat, house to house, room to room, street to street, block to block. Now, some of that fighting it was in Gaza City, but the focus has moved to Sajaya, a Palestinian city further south in the Gaza Strip. And a few days after the footage you're seeing here, a few of the members of the unit enter a building in which they're ambushed by a squad of Hamas terrorists. 4 of them are killed, but the rest of the unit doesn't know their fate and believes that they may have been kidnapped and taken into a shaft that leads to a tunnel, which is actually something that the Israelis have been scared of this entire war, okay? Their soldiers being taken as hostage. And therefore, other members of the unit pour into the same building and they're ambushed and killed. And then another wave of soldiers, now helped by members of another unit known as 669 Sheshesh okay, a unit that's known to extricate wounded soldiers. They primarily operate from helicopters, but for some reason they had people on the ground. They enter the building and they're killed too, for a grand total of 10 fatalities, which makes it perhaps the deadliest day of fighting since this war began, especially the ground invasion back on October 20th. And thus, as the commander Tomer says to his soldiers, prophecy repeats itself. In this case, what he's saying becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. As you see here, 10 soldiers killed, and there's Tomer Greenberg at the top there, second from the top left corner, his picture among the other soldiers killed on one of the toughest days in that unit's history. In addition, of course, to the day that Hamas killed 42 of their brethren on a base there in Nahalos, which was overwhelmed in the first hours of the Hamas assault. And now moving on to another tragedy of this war. Last week, the son of one of the members of the war cabinet, his name being Gadi Eisenkot, who happens also to be a former chief of staff of the Israeli army, his son was killed in an operation in Gaza. The operation, and it's just been revealed in the last couple of days, was meant to extricate the bodies, the dead bodies of 2 Israeli hostages who were located in a tunnel. The Israeli army places a high premium even on the bodies of the dead. And some of it has to do with Judaism's belief that in the sanctity of the body, in other words, that the body, every bit of it has to be buried in order to bring peace both to the family as well as to the dearly departed. And his son, Gal Eisenkot, was killed in action in the operation to extricate these 2 bodies. Now, that same day, others were killed with him, but because he was the son of one of the war cabinet members, of course, it shined a light on the People's Army nature of the Israel Defense Forces. Rarely, if ever, will you see a multi-generational army in which fathers and sons at the same time are fighting and often paying as a family a terrible price is part of the defense of the country. Now, here's a video that was published a few weeks ago of a father and son meeting each other in the midst of urban combat there in Gaza City in the northern Gaza Strip. And there you see the father and son just happen to bump into each other and, of course, embrace one another in the midst of the combat. And to me, no other image is as iconic of representing the People's Army or the family nature that the IDF is. In other words, the IDF is a family organization. It's one of the ingredients of that secret sauce that makes Israel feel like it's just one big family and that we're all in it together. A source of great strength and unity for the country. Okay, and now for the last subject we'll cover in this war update, which is in the last week, Israel has captured nearly 500 terrorists from both Hamas and its sister organization there in the Gaza Strip, Islamic Jihad. Now, despite the propaganda of both these organizations to be willing to die, to rush to martyrdom, to prefer death over life, 500 of them chose to spare their lives and to surrender. Now here, there's been footage distributed throughout the world of these fighters being stripped down to their underwear. And of course, this raised hell around the world, including here in the United States, where people said, Abu Ghraib, Abu Ghraib. This is Israel doing exactly what America did in Abu Ghraib in Iraq. And here they're abusing their war captives, and that's just simply not true. For anybody who's done just a couple weeks of active service in the Middle East will know that the reason why these people have been stripped down to their underwear is to make sure they're not carrying suicide bomb belts underneath their clothes, which jihadists are known to do. So they're being stripped down to their underwear not to humiliate, but to spare the lives of Israeli soldiers, okay? But of course, being that most people here in the West, both in the United States and in England and elsewhere, have not served even a day in the military, they simply don't know better, and therefore they try and I'm not saying they do this even out of nefarious reasons. It's just human nature to project onto other situations what you understand from your own experience, okay? And therefore, to the average American watching this footage, they're like, oh, here's Israel abusing their prisoners of war, just like we did in Iraq, or just like we did in Guantanamo Bay, or wherever else these things are alleged. And that's just simply not the case, okay? The footage seen by the Arab world has humiliated Hamas and discredited them in the eyes of their fellow Muslims and Arabs throughout the region. After all, they're looking at the leaders of Hamas in Qatar living off of the billions of dollars that have been sent to the organization by the United States and Europe, and they're spending that money on themselves in Qatar in luxury hotels and eating the best food and drinking the best wine, which of course is against Islam, that money can buy, while their brethren there in the Gaza Strip are dying by the thousands. And here, the fighters themselves surrendering to Israel's forces rather than choosing martyrdom, which they all, of course, claim is their preferred option. Anyway, folks, this brings this Israel update to a close. This is Steve, the tour guide, wishing you all a blessed continuation of the week as it merges into the weekend. Be vigilant, of course, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for spending your time with me. Bye-bye.